So Dricus Du Plessis is still your middleweight champion of the world. He defeats Sean Strickland by pretty much domination. I was in Nashville, so I had to rewatch the fight. I just got back from Nashville, actually, so I'm still a bit worn out. Been a lack of videos. I'm trying to get back on track, but everything seems to want to derail me at this point. But you know what? We're going to lock in for the rest of February and for the future because I want to make sure I'm staying active on this channel. But Dricus Du Plessis is the world champion. And I don't know who beats him at this point. Who beats Dricus Du Plessis? He just pretty much dismantled one of the guys who was thought to be his toughest competition in the middleweight division. So at this point, it comes down to just maybe a handful of guys who have a real good shot at beating Dricus Du Plessis. And luckily for you, I have compiled a list of the top 5 guys who I think have the best chance of beating Dricus Du Plessis. Now, not all of these guys that I have on this list I do think will beat Dricus, but I do think they have the best chances of potentially beating him. Now, real quick, as a disclaimer, I will not be including anybody who is moving up a division from welterweight or moving down from light heavyweight. I'm sticking with only the middleweight division for these contenders who have a chance of beating Dricus Du Plessis. So now you get the video, you understand it. Let's get right into this. At my number 5 spot. Now this is a tough list to make because I don't think there are 5 solid guys who have an amazing chance of beating Dricus Du Plessis. But at number 5, I went with good old Anthony Hernandez. Now, Anthony Hernandez has been on an absolute tear. His pace has been unmatched in the UFC. He dismantled Mikel Pereira, not Alex Pereira, and Roman Kopylov just recently. Especially Mikel Pereira's most recent fight. Now, do I really think that Anthony Hernandez can go out there and beat Dricus Du Plessis somewhere down the line? He's ranked number 13, I believe, in the rankings. Still has some work to do to get to that title shot, but if he does manage to get to that title shot in the next couple years, let's say, does he beat Dricus Du Plessis? Maybe at that time he does, but currently right now, this version of Anthony Hernandez, I am not truly sold that he could beat Dricus. But to make a case for him, could he go out there and put a pace on Dricus and just rob him in a way to where he can win a decision just by, I guess, sometimes getting takedowns? I don't know. I don't think his style is necessarily the best matchup versus Dricus, but he does do his style very, very effectively. And the main thing about Anthony Hernandez is that I just don't really see anybody else. I mean, you got Jack Hermanson above him, Brendan Allen above him, Roman Dolidze above him, Paulo Costa above him. Like, I just don't see any of those guys being higher on this list than Anthony Hernandez. It's tough. Like, I think Anthony Hernandez has a better chance of beating Dricus than a Jack Hermanson or a Brendan Allen or Dolidze or Costa. I just think that's simply a process of elimination when it comes to number 5 here. It's just, I don't feel like there really is 5 solid contenders right now at middleweight. Now, could you say down the line, Hernandez does get better and he does find a way to improve his game and just be better than Dricus, who's aging in his career? Possibly, but I think in a couple years from now, we'll be seeing the RDRs and the Bo Nichols and maybe a Shower Bullet on a rebound comeback, or a Joe Pyfer up the rankings. Like, I can see those guys in a couple years having more of a case to beat Dricus than an Anthony Hernandez. But in the current state of things, as of right now, I think number 5 goes to Anthony Hernandez. But we move on to number 4 on this list, and it does kind of pain me to say this guy's name as maybe a guy who could beat Dricus, because I also do believe that there really isn't much stock in my head right now for this guy, but it's RDR. It's Reiner de Ritter. Could Reiner de Ritter go out there and beat Dricus? I think it would have to be by fluke sub. I'm not going to lie to you. I think for him to beat Dricus, he would have to win by some sort of, random tie up on the ground and a takedown attempt, or he gets a triangle on Dricus and puts him out cold. Like, that's the only way I really see him beating Dricus. I think on the feet, Dricus is a lot better. But again, there is a possibility, and I would consider RDR a threat to Dricus. Now, is he an incredible threat? No. But would he be a threat to Dricus? Of course. His background in jiu-jitsu, he's one of those guys. He seems to get takedowns so he can implement his wrestling. Did against Kevin Holland. I mean, he surely did show Kevin Holland what a 45-70 is. So I mean, that pretty much puts him in GOAT status, I guess. I don't know. Kevin Holland's annoying. He did also beat the legend himself, Gerald Meerschaert. And if you're going out there and you're beating Gerald Meerschaert, especially by submission, dude might be different gravy. He might actually be something different on the ground. And maybe in his next few fights, he proves me wrong. And I kind of hope for Fires to prove me wrong. I kind of hope for these guys to go out there and be successful. But I know I'm not confident in him right now. But let's say he goes out there and he beats a Jack Hermanson or a Brendan Allen or Paulo Costa. Then maybe I might shift my tune a little bit more positively towards RDR. Just currently, right now, I don't see him having much ability on the feet. He was a two-weight champion. Like this guy has some credentials to him, just in MMA, not only in jiu-jitsu. So maybe he might prove me wrong. But then again, guys that come from other promotions don't typically do well in the UFC, or they have a moment of success and then they kind of fall off. Look at MVP, look at Ben Askren, MVP, the most recent one. I mean, he came into the UFC. He is older, by the way, so maybe it's a bit of a different scenario for MVP. But he just beat Sharputin, but he lost to Ian Gary, and it's tough when these guys come from other promotions. Sometimes they just aren't the best because they were not in the UFC. But maybe RDR can be that one outlier. Maybe he can be that guy who can prove that if you do come from outside of the UFC, if you do come from ONE or Bellator, then maybe that promotion isn't that shit. I think ONE Championship is better than Bellator or PFL. Sorry. I still think it's pretty trash. I still think it's pretty dog shit, but maybe RDR can prove me wrong and he can be that guy. But with that, we will move on to number 3, the third guy who I think is the biggest threat to Dricus Du Plessis for the championship belt. I think it's Kyle Baralho. Obviously, out of Fighting Nerds Gym, he showed that he can hang with the best in Jared Cannonier, who I know Cannonier is old, but I think Kyle Barajo showed some skill in that matchup that can lead him towards having a decent matchup versus Dricus Du Plessis. I was thinking about it earlier. Maybe Barajo kind of has a style to somewhat beat Dricus. I mean, doesn't carry too much power on the feet, but I think his grappling game is good. And I think his pace can match with Dricus, and maybe his striking can be enough to get past him. Do I think he does? Probably not, but it's close. I think Brawl has a real shot to beat Dricus. I think from this point on, from number 3 up, I think we see some guys who have a real shot of beating Dricus. Now, would I pick Brawlho to beat Dricus right now if it happened tomorrow? No, but I wouldn't be surprised if Brawlho showed that this Fighting Nerds Gym is just something different. Now, Brawlho does worry me a lot because I think he will get chinned at one point in his career because the way he backs up and the way he holds his chin high up in the air, he does try to cover it, but sometimes that might not be enough to keep your head from spinning. So it does worry me at some points wherever he fights a power puncher, a guy who carries heavy hands, that he might get chinned at some point. But he has good grappling. Doesn't go to it enough, in my opinion, but that is MMA nowadays. And versus Dricus, I mean, he could match the pace. He could match the style. He maybe he could take the punches. He is somewhat still young in his career, in his prime. He's 31 years old, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong, but I do know that he is in his early 30s right now. And maybe the style matchup versus Dricus could prove that maybe Barajo can go out there and get a win just by outgrinding Dricus, which is a very tough task. But you know what? Now that I think about it, outgrinding Dricus seems kind of like a very tall task to complete. But maybe Barajo could do it. Maybe he just is that untapped potential in the middleweight division, and that Fighting Nerds Gym is just something that we haven't ever seen before from a gym, and everybody in there will be an absolute monster like Gene Silva. I am worried about him in the future, though, versus Melsic Bactisarian. That's a tough matchup, and I am worried he might lose. I'll pick him, but I am worried he might lose. But you know what? Fighting Nerds Gym, they're a crazy gym right now. They're hot right now. Kyle Baralho is hot right now. 7-0 in the UFC. He's ranked number 6, I believe, right now, number 7. Dude's on a tear. Maybe he can beat Dricus. I wouldn't pick him, but I wouldn't be totally shocked if Kyle Baralho ended up beating him. But now we move on to number 2 on this list. And I do have Nasruddin Imavov here, and I think I am less confident in Imavov than Kyle Baralho. It's just that we've seen more from Imavov recently, and it seems like he somewhat has some power in his hands. He has some heat in his hands now. I mean, KOing Adesanya or TKOing Adesanya is kind of a hard thing to do. I don't care if Adesanya's aging in his career, if he's getting older, maybe his chin's deteriorating. Adesanya's not an easy guy to chin whatsoever. He chinned Jared Cannonier as well. Cannonier still, when do we really ever see Cannonier get chinned in his career? It doesn't really happen too often, or has it even happened before the Imavov fight? And yeah, I'm right. It hasn't really happened since 2018 against Dominic Reyes, and then before that, it was against Sean Jordan in his UFC debut. So we don't really ever see Jared Cannonier just get chinned and TKO'd. He's been hurt before. Obviously against Vittori, he was hurt, but it's not like we ever see him go down and get chinned. And so for Imavov to go out there and put down Cannonier and Adesanya, two guys who are hard to chin, like I think fairly hard to chin, maybe he can find a shot on Dricus Du Plessis, because we know that, or I know at least, maybe you don't know, but you should know that Dricus Du Plessis, when he was fighting in KSW, I believe it was KFW, when he fought Roberto Soldic, sorry, I just fumbled his name, when he fought him, he chinned him. So it's not like Dricus can't be chinned. Like, he can be put down and hurt and finished by somebody, just not so far, or it hasn't happened yet in the UFC. And maybe Imavov can be that guy to beat him. Now, does Imavov get to fight him next? I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I wouldn't rule it out of Imavov being able to chin Dricus Du Plessis. Now, when it comes to who I think would win this matchup, I think I would comfortably take Dricus. I'd just be worried about Imavov chinning him or just having some success in the early rounds. But I think Dricus would just grind him out through a 5-rounder and maybe get like a 4th or 5th round TKO. I don't think Imavov's gas tank could hold up to a fight with Dricus. I think he would just pressure him backwards or just put a really high pace on him, and then he would probably get a finish in the later rounds. I mean, I don't see Imavov getting takedowns on Dricus, obviously, but I do see him wilting as the fight goes on. I think Dricus would find a way to finish him in the later rounds. But in the early rounds, man, like, Imavov could find a way to put him down. It is possible. It has happened to Dricus before. Would I bet on it, though? Nah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't bet on it. But now we have reached the grand finale for our number one guy, who I think is the biggest threat to Dricus Du Plessis. And people might be split here on who you think will win this fight if it does end up happening. I do expect this guy to get the next fight versus Dricus, even though he possibly maybe doesn't deserve it as much as Imavov does. But it is Khamzat Chimaev. You pretty much could have guessed it. It is Chimaev. Now, obviously, we know Chimaev in the first round is an absolute demon. Chimaev is the first round merchant. I mean, I will call him that comfortably. He is a first round merchant. He can beat anybody in the UFC in the first round. I don't care who it is. It could be Tom Aspinall, for all goddamn sakes. He could probably finish Tom Aspinall in the first round. Just after that, once these fighters get settled into it, it seems like Chimaev just can't have as much success. I mean, we saw it with Kamaru Usman, obviously. We saw it with Gilbert Burns, obviously. It just seems like these guys, once they feel Chimaev in the first round, once they get past that super strength takedown that he has and that super strength power that he has in that first round, once they get settled in, it seems like Chimaev kind of just coasts the rest of the fight. Now, an old take that I used to have is that Chimaev's cardio was just horrible, but going back and rewatching the Gilbert Burns fight and the Kamaru Usman fight, it didn't really seem like his cardio was bad. I think he said he broke his hand in the Usman fight, but the Gilbert Burns one, maybe he got dropped and that's why, but he didn't seem tired in that third round where he came out the gate and kind of stuck it to Gilbert Burns in the beginning of that, and that's why he won the third round and won the whole fight. So, I mean, I don't think Chimaev's gas tank is horrible, but I just kind of am confused, like, what happens to him in the second and third round. Maybe he's so tired from the first round that he's trying to save his strength or his gas tank for the later rounds, and that's why he slows down. But it is kind of confusing. But if that is Chimaev in a 5-rounder and Dricus Du Plessis gets past the first round, I mean, I see hell for Chimaev if he fights that way. In a 5-rounder, I do worry for Chimaev, but obviously in the first round, like, this guy is going to ragdoll Dricus, which is going to be crazy. He's going to give Dricus hell in the first round, and that first round is up to God at this point. Like, does Chimaev finish Dricus Du Plessis in the first round, flip a coin, and that's probably what happens. I mean, it's a simple yes or no. Like, it's tough. It's tough because Chimaev has all this talent, but it doesn't really stretch out throughout an entire 3-round fight. Now, if that wasn't the case and we saw Chimaev just, dominate somebody throughout 3 rounds and he showed decent cardio, then it'd be different. But, he had all those fights where he won by, 30-second KO or first round submissions just super fast and didn't take any punches. So he didn't have much of adversity in his early part of his UFC career. So even with that, it kind of feels like we don't have much information on Chimaev besides he's a monster in the first round. I know he's had 8 fights in the UFC and he's won all of them, but I feel like I haven't seen like the true Chimaev just yet. And that's kind of scary when I think about him fighting Dricus. Like maybe we see a different level of Chimaev, but it's tough. He can only fight like once a year in like Saudi Arabia or some shit because, his whole relationship with Kadyrov and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know, man. But in the first round, he can demolish Dricus and submit him or TKO him, knock him out, whatever way you want to, whatever method you prefer. And obviously for Dricus, if he can survive the first round, his odds of winning pretty much shoot up dramatically. So Chimaev is his biggest threat, I think, by far none. Like him pretty much tearing the jaw off of Whitaker is something different to behold in the UFC, and just the way he's been in his entire career. He's always been a big threat to fighters in the first round and just in general. So Chimaev, I think, is the biggest threat. I don't really think anybody else could even make the list. Like, obviously, we just saw Dricus beat Strickland. We saw him just beat Adesanya. We saw him just beat Whitaker. I mean, yeah, Costa, no. Jared Cannonier, no. Delidze, no. Brendan Allen, no. Jack Hermanson, no. Kopylov, no. Chris Curtis, no. MVP, no. Bo Nickel, not right now, maybe later. Pfeiffer, maybe later. Mikel Pereira, hell no. Paul Craig, hell no. Andre Muniz, hell no. It's like, that's the middleweight division right now. That's literally middleweight right now. It's pretty dry. I'm not going to lie to you, for contenders for Dricus in the future. So, maybe at some point we see Dricus move up. If Dricus can fight Chimaev and win, and fight Imavov and win, move up. I mean, at that point, it would be completely dry. Maybe Barajo will make a case in time. Maybe RDR will make a case in that time span. But yeah, it's dry right now. We need some guys to get some wins. We need some Cannoniers to lose some RDRs. We need some Costas. So maybe we see old Costa come back. That would be a nice treat to see, but probably not going to happen. But yeah, I don't really see the middleweights right now, besides Chimaev and possibly Imavov, not really being able to beat Dricus. So yeah, that was my top 5 guys, my top biggest threats to Dricus Du Plessis, the current middleweight champion. If you agree, disagree, have your own list, hate my list, love my list, leave a comment down below. But I'm out here, guys. Like, subscribe, bell icon for notifications. I'll see y'all later. Peace.